Boldwood presents The Best Is Yet to Come, written by Jessica Redland and read by Rebecca Norfolk. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Prologue. The 2nd of September. Rosie. It was a Monday morning in early September, and I decided to use my day off to finally clear out his lordship's bedroom at Willowdale Hall, enlisting Mam and my best friend Autumn to help me. His lordship was the nickname Mam had given to our former boss and landlord, Hubert Cranley, because of the way he'd stomped around hurling out orders as though he was landed gentry from a different era. So much had changed since his fatal riding accident at the start of this year. His estranged son, Oliver, had returned to the estate for the first time in 18 years. Oliver and I shared a checkered history and had parted on very bad terms, so seeing him again after so long was a challenge, especially when he dropped the bombshell that he was planning to sell the hall. Not only would that mean losing my job as the manager of Willowdale Hall Riding School and Equestrian Centre, it would mean Mam and I could no longer live in Horseshoe Cottage in the grounds of the estate, which would be disastrous. Since Mam was knocked down in a hit-and-run accident on the road between the hall and the village when I was 14, her physical scars had healed, but her mental ones hadn't. She'd barely left the safety of the grounds, so I was desperate to convince Oliver to change his mind for her sake. In the process of doing that, Oliver and I faced our difficult past and fell in love all over again. Actually, we'd never stopped loving each other, but the timing and circumstances had never been right until now. His lordship's riding accident uncovered an unexpected secret. After looking into live organ donation, Oliver discovered that they weren't related, which left a huge question. If Hubert Cranley wasn't Oliver's father, who was? Oliver's mum, Catherine, had died after a short illness when Oliver was 12, so he couldn't ask her, and although Mam had been friends with her, Catherine hadn't confided in her, so the identity of Oliver's biological father remained a mystery. It was a long shot, but I wondered whether Catherine might have kept a diary, and it turned out she'd kept one every year since she was 24. We found them in Hubert's room, and it was obvious from various ripped pages that he'd been reading them and hadn't liked what he found. We'd been gathering everything together when we got distracted by a tree which had fallen onto the disused boathouse out the back of the hall during the previous night's storm. Checking out the damage, we discovered a sports car hidden inside, which turned out to be the vehicle involved in Mam's hit and run. Although finding the car and therefore discovering that the driver had been none other than Hubert Cranley was extremely distressing for Mam, it was the catalyst she needed to seek professional help and check herself into a support facility, and she'd made tremendous progress. While Mam recovered, I started on Catherine's diaries. Ploughing through page after page revealed that she'd been in an extremely unhappy, abusive marriage with a serial adulterer, but that she'd found her own happiness through a long-term secret relationship with Oliver's biological father. The big problem was that he was only ever identified by the letter C, and Oliver had no idea who C could possibly be. After a month of reading and getting no closer to solving the mystery, Oliver decided it was time we put the past to bed and focus on our future together. A future which included exciting new plans to develop Willowdale Hall, but I still hoped that one day we'd discover who his father really was. In the whole tree on the boathouse kerfuffle, we'd forgotten about the ripped pages. Until now. Autumn joined Mam and me on the floor of his lordship's former bedroom, using tape to stick together ripped-up pieces from Catherine's diaries, hoping that we'd find some clues to uncover the identity of Oliver's father, the mysterious C. Eventually, we had a few intact pages. I picked up the longest entry and started reading it in my head. It was a bit awkward with the words split and the shine from the sticky tape, but I forged on. Wednesday, the 21st of June, 2000. I don't think I've ever been so nervous in my life. H wasn't meant to be coming. He should have been working away, but he came back a day early and got a bee in his bonnet that I'd sulk if he didn't come with me. As if. He's never shown interest in anything else school-related, so I was hardly going to be stroppy if he missed parents' evening. So off we go, and he has a face on him like a slapped arse. The minute we arrived, Oliver couldn't wait to drag me over to his favourite teacher. also my favourite. Somewhat different reasons. C's face lit up when he saw me. "Oh my God," I exclaimed as I got a little further. "What?" Mam and Autumn cried together. "This is it. This is the answer." I looked at them, eyes shining. "I know who C is." "Who?" Autumn asked. "Let me just finish this to make sure." I continued reading. Impressive acting skills when he realised H was behind me. Don't know how he managed to keep that smile on his face when I bet he wanted to punch H instead. We sat down and C raved about what a brilliant student Oliver was and how he was convinced he had a future ahead of him in medicine. It should have been a really proud parent moment, but all I wanted to do was cry because H got to play dad, yet couldn't have been less interested in how Oliver was doing, and that wonderful man would have done anything to step into his shoes. How H didn't spot the resemblance, I'll never know. But I guess you don't notice things when you're not looking, do you? "See what you think," I said, passing the page to Autumn and Mam to read. "But I'm 100% certain from this that Oliver's biological father, C, is my old biology teacher, Mr. Winterson." Autumn's eyes widened as she looked up. "I agree. Oh my God." "I remember him," Mam said. "Wasn't he one of your favourite teachers?" "Yes, him and Miss Eccles." "Wasn't he Oliver's favourite teacher too?" Mam asked. "Yes, and he was more than just a teacher. He got him back on track when he was failing sixth form, and he helped him when he had a breakdown at university, so he became Ollie's mentor too." "But he's actually his dad," Autumn said, scanning down the page once more. "And it's clear from this that he knew. I wonder why he never said anything." "Only one way to find out." I clapped my hands to my cheeks, shaking my head. "I can't believe we found out who C is after all these months." "How do you think Oliver will take it?" Mam asked. "He'll be shocked, but I think he'll be delighted. It's someone he knows and admires. I know he regrets that they lost touch." "Looks like he has the perfect excuse to get back in touch now," Autumn said, handing me back the page. I glanced down it again, heart pounding. We'd done it. We'd solved the mystery, and I was absolutely certain Oliver would not only want to get in touch with Mr. Winterson, but he'd want to do it pretty quickly too. As for how Oliver would feel about Mr. Winterson keeping his identity a secret was another matter. Why hadn't he said anything? He must have known things were bad between Oliver and Hubert. I sighed, shaking my head. He must have had his reasons, and I guess we'd find those out very soon. Chapter 1. 6 weeks earlier. Emma. It's the last day of the school year, the students have gone, and I know you'll all be itching to get out of here and start your summer holidays. Kelvin Patterson, principal of Corbeck School in Carlisle, paused as he looked round the teaching and support staff gathered in the staff room. So the fact that so many of you have stayed late is testimony to how highly we all think of Emma. "And cake," called one of my colleagues, making everyone laugh. The cooks had made an enormous slab of chocolate sponge cake, which they'd iced with Good Luck Emma and a 4-leaf clover. My cheeks glowed as I felt all eyes on me, and I swallowed down the lump in my throat. I always found the summer term emotional, saying goodbye and good luck to the GCSE students, and invested in a new waterproof mascara and large supply of tissues to see me through it. But this time it was me saying goodbye to my teaching family, which thrilled and terrified me in equal measures, especially after 25 years, 19 of them at Corbeck School, devoted to a career I loved. Emma has been such an asset to this school. I could list all her amazing achievements, Kelvin continued, all promises not to make a speech or a big fuss clearly forgotten. He laughed as he caught my eye, and I shook my head vigorously. But I promised Emma I wouldn't embarrass her. What I will say is that I'm going to miss her, and I know everyone here will too. Tears pricked my eyes as I took in all the nods. My lifelong best friend Rachel placed a reassuring hand on my arm and gave me a gentle squeeze, helping me hold it together for a little longer. Kelvin focused his gaze on me. Emma, we wish you every success in your new venture on the farm. I'm not sure what's going to prove the most challenging, herding students or herding sheep, but you were brilliant at the former and I'm sure you'll be equally brilliant at the latter. There'll be a huge void when we return in September without you. Good luck to you and Grayson. Thank you for everything you've done for us all, and we hope you enjoy your leaving gifts." He led everyone in an enormous round of applause, accompanied by cheers and whistles, as I was handed several gift bags and a huge bouquet of flowers. I couldn't hold the tears back any longer, and what was the point anyway? My eyes were already red and itchy from saying goodbye to my students across the day, with each lesson end bringing me closer to my final farewell. "Grab yourselves a piece of cake," Kelvin called as the applause tailed off. "Have an amazing summer, everyone, and I look forward to seeing most of you back here in September." Everyone crowded round me, offering hugs and handshakes, which I accepted in a tear-sodden daze. "It's like Christmas," Rachel declared as she passed me the final gift bag to squeeze into my car later. I closed the back door and the boot, shaking my head at how full my car was. I can't believe how generous everyone has been. Because they all love you. Fantastic teacher, brilliant boss, amazing friend. Her voice cracked, and I enveloped her in a hug as we both sobbed together. "I was so determined not to cry today," she said, wiping her eyes when we released each other. "Nearly made it." "At least it's not a proper goodbye for us. After 47 years, you don't get rid of me that easily." My mum and Rachel's mum, Gail, had become good friends after meeting at antenatal classes, and born just 2 days apart, Rachel and I had spent a lot of time together as children. As lifelong best friends, we'd been bridesmaids at each other's weddings, and I was godmother to her twins, Kian and Maeve. It was hard to believe they were now 25. Where had the years gone? Rachel taught French and Spanish and was now head of modern languages, and I was head of sciences, specialising in biology. I loved how we'd ended up teaching at the same school. "It's going to be really strange being back here in September without you," Rachel said. "It'll be strange knowing you're back here and I'm not." I glanced wistfully towards the school building and sighed. Rachel tucked her long auburn hair behind her ears and widened her pale blue eyes at me. "I know that sigh. You're not regretting it, are you?" I shook my head and smiled reassuringly at her. "Just having a moment of nostalgia. It was a big, scary decision, but it was the right one. Let's say I'm having a few wobbles, but no regrets. Completely understandable. New home, new career, new life. That's a lot of change at once, so it's bound to feel a bit overwhelming." She hugged me once more. "I'd better let you get home and continue your packing, and I'd better get home and think about the holiday packing. You and Cormac have an amazing time in Hawaii. I'm not jealous at all. Thank you, and good luck with the move. Looking forward to my farm tour once we're back." She kissed me on the cheek, then headed off to her own car with a wave. I took one last look at the school where I'd made some lovely friends and worked with so many incredible, inspiring students. I pressed 2 fingers to my lips, kissed them, and threw the kiss in the direction of the building with a smile. What an amazing 19 years I'd had here. But Grayson and I were starting a new chapter at Brackenridge Farm in the Lake District National Park, and I was so excited about working on the farm alongside my fiancé, lapping up his extensive knowledge of Herdwick sheep, belted Galloway cattle, and environmentally friendly farming. I might be 47 years old, but age was just a number, and it was never too late to start completely afresh. Bring it on. Chapter 2. I'd not long finished unwrapping all my gifts and had them spread all over the dining table when I heard Grayson arriving home from work, prompting me that I really needed to get ready for our night out. We lived in Riverside Cottage, a 2-bedroom home in the village of Halderbeck at the northern tip of the Lake District National Park. To celebrate my last day at school, we'd booked a table at Hidden Fell, Halderbeck's only pub, a couple of minutes' walk from the cottage. While Grayson was removing his boots in the hall, Monty ran through to the dining room to see me, bouncing around for attention. A 5-year-old border collie, Monty worked with Grayson at nearby Petersgill Farm, and I loved how he always sought me out the moment they arrived home. Grayson appeared and did a double take at the laden table, running his hands through his dark hair. "Have you robbed a gift shop?" I laughed. "Looks like it, doesn't it? How many mugs this time?" 12. "Duplicates?" "A couple." I'd built up an enormous mug collection over the years, with best teacher being a common theme. I have some happy retirement ones this time. He raised his eyebrows. Retirement? Well, I suppose it is in a way. Lots of farming animal mugs too, I added, but Grayson just rolled his eyes. He was a creature of habit and would only drink from a pair of plain navy mugs he'd brought with him when he moved in with me 3 years ago. Look what I got from the staff, I said, pointing to a pile of cushions on one of the dining chairs. They'll look lovely on our new sofa. Grayson glanced at the top one, a stunning watercolour illustration of a Highland cow, and wrinkled his nose. It's a bit fussy. It's beautiful, I said, picking it up to reveal a fox design by the same artist. I'm off for my shower, Grayson said, clearly not interested in seeing the rest of the cushions. He left the room and I showed the other two, a hare and a stag, to Monty. You think they're beautiful, don't you? I said to him in a sing-song voice, which had him wagging his tail. What's that, Monty? They'll look so much nicer on the sofa than the boring plain navy cushions Grayson chose. I couldn't agree more. I stroked his ears before piling the cushions back up on the chair. Grayson's reaction didn't bother me one bit. He wasn't one for bright colours or patterns, whether that was in clothing or soft furnishings, so even a subtle check design would have been a bit fussy for him. I surveyed the rest of my gifts: candles, stationery, smellies, soft toys, a couple of lovely scarves, and enough chocolates to open my own sweet shop. One of the mugs in particular made me smile. It had a picture of a cartoon alpaca on it, next to a suitcase, accompanied by the slogan, "New adventure, alpaca my bags." I adored llamas and alpacas. I've no idea what had triggered it, because I'd never spent time around either animal, but I was always drawn towards any stationery or other merchandise I spotted my students with. I remembered mentioning my love for alpacas to the student who'd bought me the mug, after admiring her alpaca phone case at the start of the school year. It was so touching that she'd stored that information to buy me a meaningful end-of-year gift. I think I'll leave these here for now and pack them straight into a moving box tomorrow, I told Monty. We're eating out, so it's not like we need the table tonight. Before Grayson moved in with me, I could count on 2 hands the number of occasions when the dining table had been used for eating. Even though the second bedroom was set up as a home office with a desk and bookshelves, I preferred to spread out when I was marking homework, so I used the dining table and ate off a lap tray in front of the television. Both those habits irritated Grayson, who was a neat freak and a traditionalist with meals. "What's wrong with your desk upstairs?" he'd ask. "Why do you need to take over the dining table and half the floor too?" So I'd embraced eating at the dining table and found I liked how the formality gave us the opportunity to talk about our days, something we probably wouldn't have done with the TV on. Monty followed me into the kitchen, where I filled his bowl with food and changed his water, leaving him to eat while I went upstairs to get ready. "So, how was your last day?" Grayson asked when we'd settled at our table in the hidden fell and placed our food and drinks order. "Did you cry?" I went through a full box of tissues. It wasn't pretty. "You didn't have to leave," he said, his voice gentle. "We both know I did. There was no way I could have done that commute." Bracken Ridge Farm was a few miles outside Coniston, and the drive to school would have been a minimum of 90 minutes each way. "Agreed, but you didn't have to pack in the career you love. There are schools nearer the farm, you know." "I know, but I'm ready for a complete change. I know this started off as your dream, but I've fallen in love with the farm, and it's my dream too now. Can you believe that a fortnight today we'll be celebrating our first full day there? It's been a long road, but it's going to be so worth it. I'm so proud of you for keeping going, despite the setbacks." I raised my glass. "To never giving up on your dreams." He smiled and clinked his glass against mine. Bracken Ridge Farm was a very special place, one of 15 farms in the Lake District, which the author, illustrator, and conservationist Beatrix Potter had left to the National Trust. It was the 3rd tenancy Grayson had attempted to secure. The selection process was rigorous and tough, which was understandable, as the National Trust lettings team needed to ensure they found tenants with the relevant experience and aligned mindset to continue Beatrix Potter's legacy. Grayson's first application hadn't made it past the pre-viewing questionnaire. Second time around, he'd passed the questionnaire and been invited to the viewing day, a chance to tour the farm, meet the outgoing tenant farmer, and ask questions. Those who were still interested after the viewing day submitted a formal application and tender process, with those passing that invited to a selection event. Grayson progressed to that stage, but made an absolute balls-up of the interview. His words, not mine. Nerves got the better of him. His mind went blank, and he barely answered any of the questions. When Bracken Ridge Farm came up, he wasn't sure he could face going through the process for a third time, but I convinced him to give it another try. He had a massive wobble on the morning of the interview and was close to pulling out, but I talked him round, and thankfully he composed himself and aced it. I was a firm believer in things happening for a reason, and the previous disappointments had been worth it because Bracken Ridge Farm had turned out to be the one most ideally suited to Grayson's skills and interests, and it was also my personal favourite. "Hamish has asked if I can work right up until the end of the month," Grayson said. "He's got a hospital checkup on the Wednesday. I know it's not ideal, but..." "It's fine," I said when he tailed off, his expression apologetic. "I've made good progress already." "You'll do a better job than I would," he said, smiling at me. He might be neat and tidy, but Grayson's ability to pack was shocking. I'd ordered a large supply of boxes, tape and bubble wrap, and had already started working systematically through each room, so I was confident of being ready ahead of moving day, even without Grayson's help. Our tenancy would start on the first day of August, and we'd timed completion on the sale of Riverside Cottage for the same day. I'd known I'd be on my own packing next week, and had hoped that Grayson's boss Hamish would release him early to help me the following week, but it wasn't a crisis that he hadn't. I'd be on my own unpacking at the other end too, as Grayson's priority had to be the farm. While he settled in, I'd committed to the mammoth job of painting all the rooms and the farmhouse. The outgoing tenants, Jack and Teresa Gaskill, had favoured bold, dark colours like maroon, navy and forest green, which made the rooms appear small and dark. My aim was to get the bedroom, lounge and kitchen sorted first, and then fit the rest around helping Grayson on the farm. "Will you miss Petersgill Farm?" I asked. "I suppose. Hamish has been good to me, especially keeping me on after he recovered. But running someone else's farm isn't the same as running your own. That was always the plan, and it should have happened a long time ago." His jaw tightened, and he shook his head as he shuddered. "Let's not go there tonight." Our food arriving gave a natural pause in the conversation anyway. I really felt for Grayson and everything he'd been through. When I met him at a New Year's Eve party 7.5 years ago, he'd been running Lowfell Farm in the Cumbrian countryside north of Penrith with his parents. He devoted his whole life to that farm, working on it unpaid while at school, and after finishing agricultural college, he'd ploughed his wages back into nature-friendly, sustainable projects. His investment was on the understanding that his parents would retire when his dad turned 65 and pass the farm down to Grayson, just like it had been passed down from Grayson's grandfather and great-grandfather. Being a lover of animals and spending time outdoors myself, Grayson's passion for farming and nature was what had attracted me to him in the first place, and I'd loved hearing all the ideas he had for further changes when Lowfell Farm became his. During those early years of our relationship, there'd never been any question mark over Lowfell Farm becoming Grayson's. His parents had mentioned it when I first met them, and they'd shown me the unused barn, which they were getting converted into a new home for them so that Grayson could have the farmhouse as his own. I'd seen each stage of the barn conversion, and had even been shopping with Grayson's mum for soft furnishings. All the while, there were constant references to Grayson taking over. And then, they'd completely shafted him. Just before Easter 3 years ago, they announced that they'd sold Lowfell Farm and would be moving to Corfu, where the warmer climate would be kinder to his mum's arthritis. No warning, no discussion. Just a done deal a year ahead of his dad's planned retirement. They couldn't understand why Grayson was so upset, especially when they'd done him a huge favour by arranging with the new owner for Grayson to stay on as a farmhand. A farmhand! As if that came close to compensating for taking his future home and livelihood away from him. I was devastated for Grayson that his parents could do something so devious and not actually see how wrong it was. He was a kind man and empathetic to his mum's health conditions, so he'd definitely have found a way to make their move abroad possible, perhaps by selling the barn conversion or some land, but they hadn't given him that opportunity. The new owner of Lowfell Farm had agreed that Grayson's parents could rent the barn conversion from him while they searched for a property in Corfu. They extended the invite to Grayson, but he was so angry and disappointed with them that he moved in with me instead. We'd been a couple for over 4 years by that point, and had talked about moving in together on the farm when he took over, so it wasn't like it hadn't been on the cards for us. But it was a shame that, instead of being able to celebrate it as a key moment in our relationship, it had become a reactive, rushed necessity. Grayson turned down the job with the new owner and took on some temporary labouring work while thinking about what he wanted from the future. 6 months later, he secured a temporary role managing Petersgill Farm while Hamish took some time out for cancer treatment. Being temporary made it perfect for Grayson to work towards his new dream of becoming a tenant farmer on one of Beatrix Potter's farms, although it had meant that he'd need to step back into the role of farmhand rather than manager when Hamish was well enough to return to work, which hadn't been nearly as demanding or fulfilling for him. But it had been a bit of a short-term pain for long-term gain, because, in a fortnight's time, he'd finally be living his dream. The best things came to those who waited, and Grayson had done more than his fair share of waiting. I was so lucky to be part of that dream with him. Chapter 3. On the 2 occasions I'd been to Brackenridge Farm, visiting day in January and over the Easter holidays in early April shortly after Grayson accepted the tenancy offer, it had been drizzling. Low cloud had shrouded the fells, preventing me from seeing it at its best. But as Grayson pulled onto the farm track on Sunday morning, my heart soared. The sun was shining in a cornflower blue sky, and I could finally take in the beauty of the setting. "Impressive, eh?" Grayson said, giving me a sideways glance. "It's stunning." The whitewashed farmhouse itself was picture-perfect, double-fronted with a wooden porch, climbing roses round the door and windows, and an attractive lawn enclosed by a dry stone wall. But it was the backdrop that took my breath away. The fells were higher than I'd expected, curving protectively around the farm. There were approximately 1,000 acres of land consisting of fields to the front and side of the house and the fells beyond, and I couldn't quite believe that it would soon be all ours to nurture over a 15-year tenancy. The track opened out into a large parking area opposite the side of the house, flanked by barns and various outbuildings. Several hens were strutting around, so Grayson carefully manoeuvred his 4x4 around them. Teresa, a warm, gentle woman in her early 60s, crossed the track, arms outstretched in welcome. "So lovely to see you both again," she said, taking my hands and kissing my cheek before doing the same to Grayson. "I've radioed Jack and he's on his way down on the quad bike. Do you want to come in for a cuppa, Grayson, or would you rather get straight out?" "Straight out, if that's okay with you." It was their final handover session, and Grayson wanted to make the most of it. Jack had said he was welcome to ring him after we'd moved in, but Grayson didn't think that was fair, especially when Jack was retiring, so should be given the opportunity to fully let go. "Jack thought you'd say that," Teresa said, smiling at him. "I'll see you later." She led me through the side door, which was used as the main entrance to the house, through the boot and cloak room, and into the large kitchen. I smiled at the piles of newspaper and boxes. "Please tell me your house looks as chaotic as ours," she said as she removed a couple of mugs from under cupboard hooks. "It does. Boxes everywhere." "Are you excited about moving here?" she asked as we settled in the lounge a few minutes later with mugs of tea. "Very, but I'm nervous too." "Oh, you'll be fine. It's a wonderful farm, and we've both been very happy here. Wish we could have stayed, but retirement calls, and to be honest, we're both ready for it. Did you manage to secure a teaching job locally?" "Slight change of plan. Moving to a farm is a big change in lifestyle, and I decided I wanted to fully embrace it, so I'm going to help Grayson out." "Oh, how lovely. Have you worked on a farm before?" "Never, but I love animals and I'm an enthusiastic learner. I might not be quite so enthusiastic when it's bucketing it down, but I'll give it my all." "Good for you. And if you don't like it, at least you still have teaching to fall back on." "Do you ever help Jack out?" I asked. "I collect the eggs each morning, but that's as far as it goes. I was happy to live on a farm, but I never wanted to be a farmer, and Jack knew that from the outset. I've got my sewing business, and I wanted to keep that going." I'd already discovered from my previous visit that Teresa made soft furnishings. One of the spare bedrooms was her sewing room, and I've been fascinated by the floor-to-ceiling shelving units packed with colourful bolts of fabric, crates full of yarn, and small sets of drawers full of thread and sewing paraphernalia. Most of the time it's a one-person job, Teresa continued, but there are key times of the year when lots of help is needed. We've got 3 grown-up children who help out, and the neighbouring farmers all lend each other's skills and equipment. I think Jack's already introduced Grayson to them. He has. I paused to sip on my tea, frowning. You don't think there's going to be enough for me to do here? Oh, goodness, please don't think that. There's always something to do on a farm, so I'm sure Grayson will be able to keep you busy. If he doesn't, there are plenty of other things you could do to keep busy and bring additional income in. Such as? It depends on your time and inclination. There are minimal effort activities like selling eggs. We've had eggs and an honesty box at the end of the track for years. Of course, minimal effort means minimal income, but as the eggs would go to waste otherwise, it was a no-brainer. Not that you can do that with Grayson not wanting to keep the hens. I hadn't been too pleased when he'd made that decision, as I'd loved the idea of checking the hen house each morning for fresh eggs. We're not running a poultry farm, was his unhelpful response. A handful of hens was hardly that, but it wasn't worth debating. He was, after all, the animal expert and in charge of the farm. For more effort and more income, you could run a bed and breakfast using the spare bedrooms, Teresa continued. I did that for a couple of years when we first took the farm on, and the income was welcome, although for me the downsides eventually outweighed the positives and I packed it in. Downsides? I prompted. Constantly washing sheets and towels, no-shows, feeling like I couldn't go anywhere in case guests arrived early. She laughed lightly. I'm not selling it very well, am I? I smiled at her. Not really. Any other suggestions? She sipped on her tea, evidently thinking about it. Oh, I know. It's not something I actually actioned, but I did all the research several years back. Come with me. Intrigued, I followed her up the stairs and into her sewing room, which also had boxes everywhere. She pulled open a drawer in a tall filing cabinet, shaking her head after rifling through it. It's not in there, she muttered, standing up after going through all the drawers. Where could it? She looked around the room, brow creased. Maybe. Wait here a minute. She dashed out of the room and I looked around me. The bolts of material had gone, and all that remained on the shelves was several crocheted animals. I took a step closer. Was that? I moved aside a giraffe to reveal 2 adorable white llamas. I picked them both up, admiring the pastel-coloured rugs over their backs and the scarves around their necks. One was wearing a bobble hat and glasses, and the slightly smaller one sported a jaunty beret. Found it, Teresa announced, returning to the room with a ring binder clutched to her chest. She nodded towards the llamas in my hands. You like them? Oh my gosh, Teresa, I love them. These are amazing. I have a thing for llamas and alpacas. Then you must have them. Oh, I couldn't. They must have taken you ages to make. I studied their adorable expressions and knew I'd regret it if I didn't keep them. Let me pay for them at least. Absolutely not. Consider them a housewarming gift, and if you love camelids, you're going to love this. She handed me the ring binder. An A4 page was inserted into the cover pouch, with the words Project Camelid written at the top in thick marker pen capitals, and a picture of a herd of llamas beneath it. After I stopped doing the B&B, I was planning on running a llama or alpaca walking business on the farm, she said, smiling at me. My heart leapt for the second time that morning. A business walking my favourite animals around the farm. I couldn't imagine anything more perfect. I opened the binder and started flicking through the pages, excitement bubbling inside me. The costings will be out of date, but everything else should be helpful. Let's go back downstairs to our drinks and I'll tell you more about it. You want to do what? Grayson asked, stopping at a T-junction halfway home and staring at me, eyebrows knitted. I want to set up an alpaca or llama walking business, I repeated. Or rather, I want to look into it. Teresa gave me contact details for 2 places she visited when she was doing her research. Is walking llamas or alpacas even a thing? Yes, and it's really popular. Why? I don't get it. That's probably because you're not the target audience. He shook his head before pulling away. How much does a llama cost? Probably nothing. The ones that Teresa was looking into were rescues from someone whose circumstances changed. If I was a breeder or wanting to show them, we could be talking significant money, but that wouldn't be the plan. What do you think? I think I don't like the idea of the general public traipsing all over my land. I rolled my eyes at him. We'd already had that conversation many times. There were several rights of way across the farm, so he was just going to have to accept the idea that he couldn't completely escape from people. If I did start walks, I'd stick to the lower parts of the farm out of your way, so there's no need to panic, and it's not like it's going to be several times a day every day with stacks of people. Where would you keep them? He asked, the hard edge to his tone suggesting to me he really wasn't keen. Teresa would have used the front field opposite the house and reconfigured that stone barn which backs onto it to give them shelter. Jack doesn't use the field or the barn, so presumably you won't either. Probably not, but... But what? I prompted when he tailed off. I don't know. It's not something I was expecting. Me neither, and I'm not saying I'm definitely doing it, but it is something I really want to look into. He sighed. Sod it. I suppose there's no harm in doing some research, but if you did want to go ahead, you're on your own with it. I don't have time or the interest. Okay, that's fine by me. I mean it, he said, his tone a little more forceful, as though he wasn't convinced he'd made his point clear. Any work needed in the field or barn would have to be done without me. I'm here for the herdies and belties, not some stupid llamas. They're not stupid, I said testily. He glanced at me, eyebrows raised, clearly surprised that I'd snapped, something I never did. But what did he expect? Just because it wasn't his thing didn't mean he needed to be rude about it. What's your next step? He asked, his voice softer, although still laced with disinterest. I'm going to get in touch with the owners of the farms Teresa visited and see if I can have a tour too. She says they're completely different setups, which helped her focus on how she wanted to run her business. I filled Grayson in on the rest of the conversation I'd had with Teresa. He made all the right noises, but it was obvious he wasn't engaged. Not that I minded, because I liked the idea of being in charge of something on my own, rather than working all the time for Grayson. He had an incredible amount of knowledge and expertise about Herdwick sheep and belted Galloway cattle, which I could never hope to match, but it would be lovely to build up my own area of expertise. As soon as we got home, I was going to contact those two farms and see if I could organise visits for the next week in between packing. I'd already been excited about the move, but the idea of my own business with my favourite animals had taken it to a new level. Chapter 4. On Thursday morning, I was in high spirits as I drove 40 minutes from Riverside Cottage to Butterby Croft in the Yorkshire Dales National Park for my second research visit of the week. Windows down, I sang along to the Birthday Bangers, a playlist of banging tunes Rachel and I created years ago for the car journey on our annual birthday weekend away together. If I was feeling low, it never failed to lift me, as not only were all the songs upbeat, but the memories they evoked were too. And if my mood was already sunny like today, the playlist maintained that happiness. A couple of days ago, I travelled to Holtsby Farm, over the border into Lancashire. It was a large family-run business with the husband and son managing the farm and the wife and daughter running a farm shop, cafe and animal handling experiences. Visitors could pet and walk llamas, feed playful goats, stroke rabbits and guinea pigs, and bottle feed lambs in the spring. There were also walking trails round the farm to see sheep, pigs and cows. It was an impressive setup, albeit on a much grander scale to what I'd be running at Brackenridge Farm. Today's destination of Butterby Croft, run by sisters Ruth and Lizzie, was a former working farm but now operated as a sanctuary for unwanted animals, and I was looking forward to seeing the contrast. They had alpacas rather than llamas, and I had a feeling they'd be the way I wanted to go. I'd loved meeting the llamas at Holtsby Farm, but I was keen for my walks to appeal to all ages and couldn't help thinking that younger children might be less intimidated by alpacas, which were about half the size of their cousins. I'd had an exceptionally busy week, working my way through Teresa's Project Camelid folder, in between packing up the cottage. She was a woman after my own heart, very organised and thorough with her research, and I'd learned so much already from that and my visit to Holtsby Farm. Grayson and I had barely spent any time together, as he'd been working longer hours at Petersgill Farm helping Hamish finish off a couple of projects, and I'd spent my evenings packing to catch up on the 2 days lost to research. Thankfully, he hadn't made any more stupid llamas comments, although he wasn't exactly brimming over with enthusiasm either. But that was fine, because I had enough enthusiasm for both of us. Ruth had told me she'd meet me in the farmyard, and as soon as I pulled in, a woman in khaki combat trousers and a maroon vest top smiled and waved. "Great to meet you, Emma," she said, shaking my hand with enthusiasm as soon as I got out of my car. "How was your journey?" "Really good, especially in this gorgeous weather. Isn't it divine? Lizzie's with the alpacas now, so let's go and meet them. We've got 4 boys, Bart, Magnus, Percy and Clyde, who were all rescues from the same place 2 years ago. They're absolutely gorgeous," I said after Lizzie introduced me to the 4 boys. Magnus was light grey, but the other 3 were all white. "Don't say that too loud in front of Percy," Lizzie said, laughing. "He's the alpha and he knows he's a very handsome fella, don't you, Percy?" She stroked his neck and he nuzzled his head into her neck. "Most alpacas don't really like their faces being touched, but Percy loves it," Ruth said. "He loves a kiss on the side of his nose. When he nuzzles into Lizzie's neck like that, that's exactly what he's after." Lizzie kissed him and stroked his ears. "Is it just because he knows you, or is he like that with everyone?" I asked. "Everyone," they said together. I gently put my hand out and stroked his face, and moments later, he nuzzled into my neck, inviting a kiss from me too. "I'm in love," I said, stroking his neck. "He charms everyone he meets," Ruth said. I stroked the other 3 on their necks and shoulders. Although I'd read loads and studied stacks of photos to understand the differences between the 2 animals, nothing beats seeing them in the flesh and interacting with them like this. While I loved llamas too, the smaller alpacas were the ones which had completely captured my heart. I loved how they had more hair, often quite fluffy, on their faces, and how they had a more smushed up appearance compared to the longer-faced llamas. Their ears were different, the alpacas having smaller spear-shaped ears and llamas having longer banana-shaped ones. The longer I spent with them, the more I could see the personality differences emerging that I'd read about, all of which convinced me that they were the better animal for my walks. Just like Teresa had found from her own visits, it was really helpful to see 2 completely different setups. Ruth and Lizzie invited volunteers to help, rather than being open to the public, like Holtsby Farm. They also ran a special programme for schools and clubs, which was something I might like to consider much further down the line. Spending the day with the sisters was inspiring, and not just because of the amazing work they did with the wide range of animals they cared for, but because they were inspirational women in their own right. I'd discovered that Ruth was a year younger than me, and Lizzie was a year older, and they'd both tragically lost their husbands within 3 months of each other shortly after Lizzie turned 40. The farm had belonged to Ruth and her husband, but she hadn't wanted to run it on her own, so she and Lizzie had decided to live there together, sell off some land and livestock, and run an animal sanctuary instead. We shared the same outlook and had so much in common that I felt like I'd found 2 new friends after only a short time in their company. "It's been a great day," I said to Ruth and Lizzie as I prepared to leave late that afternoon. "You've both been so helpful." "It's been lovely having you here," Ruth said. "You're welcome back any time, and you can call or email with any questions. If you decide to go for it, let us know," Lizzie added. "The next time we hear about llamas or alpacas in need of rescue, you might want to take them yourself. If I do go for it, which I'm fairly certain I will, I think alpacas will be best." All the way home, I couldn't stop smiling at the thought of my own herd of alpacas. It was a big decision, and as it affected Grayson as well as me, I needed to be 100% sure it was right for both of us. Or maybe 90% right for Grayson, as I was fairly sure he'd never be fully on board. Chapter 5. 3 weeks later. "Oh wow, Emma, it's absolutely stunning!" Back from her holidays and looking relaxed and refreshed, Rachel turned in a slow circle in the farmyard on Thursday morning, taking in my new home. "How's it going?" "Good, but tiring. I've spent most of the past fortnight painting." "The walls or yourself?" she asked, smiling at me. "Have I got it in my hair again?" I put my hand up and felt the crusty paint between the choppy layers of my long dark hair, and as I moved my hand away, I noticed a couple more patches of paint on my arm and rolled my eyes at Rachel, who laughed. "I've got a few gifts to congratulate you on your new home and new adventure." She opened the back door to her car and removed a beautiful bouquet of flowers in assorted shades of pink, my favourite colour, and a large sparkly pink gift bag. Happy housewarming? Oh, Rachel, you shouldn't have. Thank you. I breathed in the scent of the flowers and peeked into the gift bag, spying a bottle of Prosecco and a card along with some wrapped gifts. You're welcome. I'm gasping for a cuppa, so can you open those while we have a drink? Then I need the grand tour, inside and out. While Rachel explored the kitchen, opening drawers and peeking in cupboards, I flicked the kettle on to boil and filled a vase with water for the flowers. When we sat down at the kitchen table with our drinks, she instructed me to open my gifts, a box of my favourite chocolates and a cerise pink boiler suit for working on the farm, which made me laugh and which I couldn't wait to wear. The final gift was a beautiful wooden house painted white with a pair of sheep beside it and the words, "Our New Adventure," written on the plinth. This is gorgeous, I exclaimed, twisting it round to take in the detail. I'll find somewhere special to display it. I carefully wrapped it back up in tissue paper and returned it to the gift bag. Do you want the inside tour now? Good plan, although if it's all as lovely as your kitchen, I might never leave. I led her upstairs to the master bedroom at the back of the house. What a view, she declared, heading straight for the dual aspect windows looking out over the fells and fields. How amazing to wake up to that every day. She frowned as she looked around the rest of the room. This isn't your bedroom furniture. We needed a new mattress, which led to a conversation about a new bed, which led you to ordering an entire new bedroom suite, she said. It's not your usual taste. I like it, but it's quite dark, I finished for her. Grayson chose it. I'd been torn between white and pale grey painted furniture, and when I asked Grayson his opinion, he looked up from his iPad and declared they were all a bit bland. A few minutes later, he thrust his iPad under my nose, saying, I like this, completely different to what we had before. I couldn't argue with that. The deep midnight blue furniture was certainly a contrast to the cream furniture at Riverside Cottage, but as this was the first time Grayson had ever shown the slightest smidgen of excitement about anything house-related, it didn't feel right to object. I showed Rachel the 2 double bedrooms at the front, which were separated by the bathroom. We'll probably put my old bedroom furniture in one of these, but for now most of my stuff is in one of the barns. It's been easier painting and putting up blinds and curtains without furniture in the rooms. I showed Rachel the final bedroom at the back of the house, which contained my desk. I started unpacking in here, I said, pointing to a quarter-filled bookcase, but I realised I have no sense of how I want to use this space now that I'm not teaching, so I decided to leave it for now. It's another lovely room, Rachel said, peering out the window. I'm not sure I'd get much work done in here. I'd be stopping every few minutes to gaze at the fells. Why don't you turn it into a crafting room? Because I don't think a one-day workshop painting plant pots with you makes me a crafter. An artist studio, then, she said. And don't say you can't draw anymore, because a talent like yours doesn't just disappear when it isn't regularly used. I laughed at how well she knew me, because I had been about to protest that most of my drawings from recent years could hardly be called art. Illustrations of Bunsen burners, microscopes, test tubes, and bacteria. Drawing had been a big passion of mine since my teens. I'd continued to sketch over the years, and in my 30s, as I'd struggled to come to terms with my marriage to Matthew ending, art had been my salvation and my therapy. I'd poured out my emotions onto huge canvases filled with dark, angry, sweeping brushstrokes or charcoal sketches of a solitary figure battered by stormy weather. It took a long time, but eventually colour and variety returned to my work. Since meeting Grayson, I'd picked up my sketchpad from time to time when something captured my imagination, and I suspected I'd dig it out again soon because I was surrounded by inspiration at the farm. I was so thankful that I hadn't felt the need to lose myself in art like I had done back then, and I hoped I'd never feel that way again. Ooh, new sofas, Rachel observed when we went back downstairs and into the lounge. I didn't think you liked leather suites. It's that tan colour I'm not a fan of, but I like the chocolate brown. And don't my leaving cushions look gorgeous, although Grayson chose the navy ones behind them, and he keeps swapping them to the front. Yours are so much nicer, she said. His are a bit boring, I suggested, and she nodded, laughing. There's still a lot to organise, I said as we returned to our drinks in the kitchen. But the big job was the painting. Mum and John helped last week, and I finally finished it this morning. John was my stepdad, who Mum had met when I was 8, a year after splitting up from my dad. "It's going to be just as gorgeous as Riverside Cottage when you're finished," Rachel said. "How did it feel closing the door for the last time?" There were tears. She placed her hand over mine. I thought there might be. My beautiful home had been my sanctuary after the unexpected breakdown of my marriage 15 years ago. Matthew had given me the option to buy him out of our home, but I couldn't bear the thought of staying there surrounded by memories and regrets. Riverside Cottage belonged to Rachel's grandma, who'd just gone into a care home with rapidly progressive dementia, so I rented it from her and bought it a year later after she passed away. Throwing myself into my career during the week and refurbishing the cottage during weekends and holidays gave me a much-needed focus and, along with my art, helped me heal. "Ready for the outside tour?" I asked Rachel after we'd finished our drinks. "Did you bring your wellies with you?" "I couldn't find them, but I've got my hiking boots." "Good, because it'll be boggy." After several days of rain, summer had returned with bright blue skies and a few lazy clouds. It was good to venture out in shorts and a vest top again, instead of being bundled up in a waterproof, but sensible footwear was still essential. Although sensible might be a stretch for describing my gorgeous sky blue Wellington boots covered in cartoon sheep. "I love those wellies," Rachel said as I shoved my feet into them by the door. "They're going to look great with your new boiler suit." They were the first purchase I made when I heard we got the farm, and if it wasn't so hot today, I'd have put that boiler suit on with them. I love it. I can't wait to show it to Grayson. I locked up while Rachel put on her hiking boots by the boot of her car. Joining her, I pointed out a toilet and laundry room and an extension, both accessible from the farmyard, and an external door to a large office which Grayson used. "So, tell me about Hawaii," I said as we set off along the track, deeper into the farm. "It was amazing. We were expecting the islands to be beautiful, but they blew us away. It's probably best if I talk you through my photos when we've done the tour, because I'm not going to do justice to it with words. You need to see it. Might have cost us a small fortune, but you only turn 50 once, so it has to be done in style. Now that the bar's been set so high from Cormac's big birthday, I need to think hard about what I want to do for mine. Can't believe it'll be us two turning 50 in 2 years. Where's the time gone? Crazy, isn't it? By the way, I've settled the balance for our Northumberland weekend. Can't wait." Grayson and I needed to cancel a week in Crete as it had clashed with the start of the tenancy. So with no holiday happening this year, I was especially looking forward to my birthday weekend away with Rachel, something we'd done every year for the past 2 decades. "Me neither. Favourite weekend of the year. We've got about 1,000 acres, I told Rachel, as we passed the last of the outbuildings and went through a gate into one of the empty fields. Some of our large flock of Herdwick sheep